Alright everyone, welcome back to another Commander Deck Tech video. By popular request, I am now using Moxfield for all my deck tech videos. I think it's a better website for me now. Gives you big pictures, you can see it here. I think it has a better layout, and you can organize things by price too. So we have Lathril Blade of the Elves. This is going to be a budget deck, and I don't know the exact cost. I know it's under $50 total. This is probably one of the most popular commander options right now, and helps to strengthen what was already a theme in black and green elves by giving you a win con here. So she's a 2/3 black and green elf, legendary elf noble. She has menace, and whenever Lathril Blade of the Elves deals combat damage to a player, create that many 1/1 green elf warrior creature tokens. So that's going to be a theme of the deck. We want to deal some combat damage. We can tap her to tap 10 untapped elves we control. Each opponent loses 10 life and we gain 10 life. This is one of those commanders that, aren't you glad Paradox Engine got banned? Because holy cow, this would be pretty easy to win with. I mean, it's still pretty easy to win with even if you don't have those crazy combos, but we are going to be playing on a budget. So what we have here, we have some combat cards just to make it easier to deal that combat damage and then get those elves. So we have Rancor. I really like Rancor because it can then drop off, goes back to your hand. So anytime your commander's killed, you get the Rancor back and it'll give her +2 power, so you get even more elves. We have Alpha Authority because it also acts as a little bit of protection, gives our commander hexproof, and she can't be blocked by more than one creature, so interacts well with Menace, so she pretty much becomes unblockable. Same thing with Vorak Battlehorns, but also gives Trample. Then we have Timberwatch Elf. We can tap it so that target creature gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of elves on the battlefield, just to get more elves out of our combat. And then we have Whisper Silk Cloak to give Shroud, as well as make her unblockable. We have Crown of Skemfar. The enchanted creature gets +1/+1 for each elf we control and has reach, so that's another way that can get out of hand, and it's also kind of one of those enchantments that will return to your hand. And then we have Immaculate Magistrate. We put a +1/+1 counter on target creature for each elf we control. So a lot of cards here that reward us for our numbers of elves, makes our Lathril even bigger, so when we deal combat damage we get even more elves, which we can then use this ability and put even more counters on her. Now, a big part of this deck I want to talk about here is the card draw, because it is essential when we're playing on a budget. We don't have the most overpowering cards to choose from. So we do have a bunch of mana producers, we have a bunch of card draw. The deck may not be super strong, but it's going to be quick. So we have Elvish Visionary, pretty simple, enters and draws us a card. We have Miara Thorn of the Glade. It's a triggered ability with a cost of 1 mana and 1 life, but whenever another elf we control dies, we get to draw a card. Skemfar Avenger. Whenever another non-token elf or berserker we control dies, we draw a card and we lose a life, so 2 very cheap cards that will help us get more card draw. Then we have Lifecrafter's Bestiary. We're going to be casting a lot of elves. We have a ton of them. We have well over 30. Whenever we cast a creature spell, we pay a green and we draw a card. Then we have Llanowar Visionary, kind of a combination of a Llanowar Elf and an Elvish Visionary. Enters, we draw a card and it can tap for 1 green. Then we have Beast Whisperer, one of the better cards in the whole deck. Whenever we cast a creature spell, we get to draw a card. We have Harmonize because it's dirt cheap, 4 mana for 3 cards. Masked Admirers, 4 mana, it enters the battlefield and we draw a card, but we can always return it from the graveyard whenever we cast a creature spell and pay 2 green mana. We have Okame Adversary. This is a very solid card if you want to play on a budget. Costs us 2 less if an opponent controls a green permanent, has Death Touch, and whenever it deals combat damage to another player, we draw a card. And then we have Voice of Many. This is a fantastic card from Commander 2019. When it enters the battlefield, we draw a card for each opponent who controls fewer creatures than us, which when we're playing elves, this is all about tokens and numbers. We have Moldervine Reclamation, another way we can draw cards off of our elves dying. But this time, instead of losing life, we gain life. We have Shamanic Revelation. We draw a card for each creature we control. This is a sorcery, but we also gain 4 life for each creature we control with power 4 or greater. And now we have some graveyard cards in here just to get some stuff back. A lot of the better graveyard stuff that we can play in black is a little bit too expensive, like Patriarch's Bidding. That would be perfect for this deck. But we have Roots of Wisdom, which is more elf themed. We mill 3 cards and then return a land card or elf card from our graveyard to our hand. And if we can't, we just draw a card. We have Elderfang Ritualist. When it dies, we return another target elf card from our graveyard to our hand. We have Serpent Soul Jar. Whenever another elf dies, we have to exile it, but we can tap it and pay 2 life until the end of turn. We may cast a creature spell from among cards exiled with Serpent Soul Jar. Then we have Golgari Finebroker. We get a permanent card back from our graveyard to our hand when it enters. And then we have Return Upon the Tide. Return target creature card from our graveyard to the battlefield. If it's an elf, we get 2 1/1 green elf warrior creature tokens and a foretell cost of 4. So if we want to play it earlier on for 2, we get to exile it, and then 4 mana we get it for 1 cheaper. So I think that's a good deal. Our lands aren't really anything special. We have 1 in Rogue's Passage. I guess it's useful if we want to make our Lathril unblockable. Other than that, we have a Path of Ancestry. So whenever we cast the mana on a creature of the same type, we then get to scry 1. But other than that, it's pretty much just the standard mana fixing. We have Arbor Elf for mana. Now we're talking about our mana creatures here, mana cards. We have Arbor Elf, Elves of Deep Shadow for black mana, Elvish Mystic, Finhorn Elves, and Llanowar Elves all do the same exact thing. Then we have Gnarlroot Trapper. We tap it and pay a life to add 1 green mana to our pool, but we can only use it on elf creature spells. We can also tap it to give another attacking elf we control Death Touch until end of turn. Then we have Soul Ring, we have Elvish Archdruid, probably the closest thing to Priest of Titania we can play in here without it getting too expensive. Also nice because it gives our other elf creatures +1/+1. Then Llanowar Tribe, 3 mana for a 3/3 that can tap for 3 mana, definitely worth it. And then we have Marwyn the Nurturer. So whenever another elf enters the battlefield, so this includes tokens, she can get pretty big and she'll be able to tap for 1 mana equal to her power. Then we have some pain cards in here. This isn't the main way that we win. Of course, the main way that we win is by taking advantage of our elves and numbers, tapping 10 of them to have each opponent lose 10 life. Late game, that can be devastating, but we have more pain cards in here. Nadir's Nightblade. Whenever a token we control leaves the battlefield, each opponent loses 1 life and we gain a life. Shaman of the Pack. When she enters, target opponent loses life equal to the number of elves we control. We have Poison Tip Archer. Whenever another creature dies, each opponent loses a life. And then we have Skemfar Shadow Sage. When she enters, we choose 1. Each opponent loses X life, where X is the greatest number of creatures we control that have a creature type in common, or the second mode, we gain X life, where X is the greatest number of creatures we control that have the same creature type in common. And then we have a few protection cards in here. We also have other cards in here that protect them, but these only really serve that purpose. We have Aspect of Mongoose. Enchanted creature can't be the target of spells or abilities, I think, on a budget. It doesn't give haste, it doesn't give anything like that, but it's reusable. We have Golgari Charm, really just in here to regenerate each creature we control. That's the worst thing about this deck, is that you have a massive board, but if someone plays a board wipe, so long as it's not something like Wrath of God or a Damnation, anything that prevents regeneration, you're going to be fine here. And then we have Swiftfoot Boots to give hexproof and haste. Then we have some removal in here. We have a ton of removal. Definitely not a weakness of the deck. We have Nature's Claim, Crossing Grip, give you that split-second removal for artifacts and enchantments. Maelstrom Pulse, also really good against kind of the mirror. So if you want to play against another Lathril deck and destroy all their elf tokens, you can do that pretty easily with a Maelstrom Pulse. We have Putrefy. We have Reclamation Sage, so we get the combination of elf and removal. And then we have Binding the Old Gods. This saga's pretty good. Destroy target non-land permanent and opponent controls off the first lore counter. Second one says we search our library for a forest card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, and then the third one gives all of our creatures Death Touch until end of turn. And then we have Death Sprout, destroys a creature and gives us a land. And we have Casualties of War, dirt cheap for what it does, but we get to choose from all of those modes and destroy one. And then we have some search cards in here just to get us a variety of things, lands or creatures. Bounty of Skemfar, we reveal the top 6 cards of our library, and then we put a land card from among them onto the battlefield tapped, and an elf card from among them into our hand. Then we have Farhaven Elf, and we have Wood Elves down here to kind of do the same thing. And we also have Spring Bloom Druid. Those are just really in here to get us to our lands. We have Harald, King of Skemfar. When he enters, we look at the top 5 cards of our library. We get to reveal an Elf, Warrior, or Tyvar card from among them and put them into our hand. And then we have Realm Walker. This is probably one of the more expensive cards in the deck at $3. But a Changeling enters the battlefield, we choose a creature type. We may look at the top card of our library at any time, and we may cast creature spells of the chosen type from the top of our library, which can really help speed up the deck. And then we have some token cards in here. This is very important because we want to get off to a quick start. We want to get those elf tokens out there so that we can then plan to use her ability. Sylvan Offering's great because it's an X-costed spell, so we get to choose the amount of mana we want to put into it, and then we get those elf tokens. There's a lot more here. You can also create a Tree Folk token, and you give an opponent one of each of those, but it's really just there to get you the numbers. We have Dwynen's Elite, enters the battlefield. If we control another elf, we get another token, Elvish Warmaster, this one's actually probably the most expensive at 3 and 35 cents. Whenever one or more elves enter the battlefield under your control, you get a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token, but it only triggers once each turn, so make sure you take advantage of that ability on your opponent's turns as well. And he has another activated ability. We can pay 7 mana, elves we control get +2/+2 and gain Death Touch until end of turn. We have Prowess of the Fair. Whenever another non-token elf is put into our graveyard from the battlefield, we get a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token. Then we have Imperious Perfect. Other elf creatures we control get +1/+1. And then we can pay a green and tap her to create a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token, so that pairs up well with the Elvish Warmaster. And then we have Elvish Promenade. Tribal Sorcery Elf. We create a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token for each elf we control. And then we have Lissalana Huntmaster. This one's fantastic. Whenever you cast an elf spell, you may create a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token. And then we have a couple untapped cards in here. Most of the untapped cards would take us out of a decent budget, so we're just playing a couple in here. Copperhorn Scout. Whenever she attacks, you untap each other creature you control. Fantastic 1 mana common from Conspiracy 2. And then we have Curse of Bounty. You enchant a certain player, and then whenever that player is attacked, you untap all non-land permanents you control. Each opponent attacking that player untaps all non-land permanents they control too. So that's going to do it for the deck. I think overall it's a quick deck. It may not be super resilient compared to other versions of this Lathril deck, but if you're looking for a cheap elf deck, under $50, there you go. I think she's a fun commander option. Definitely a couple different things you can do there. Even though it's always going to end up being an elf tribal deck, you can focus more on the combat strategy, or you can just focus on making a good stuff elf deck regardless of making tokens. You can of course focus on combos. There are a lot of combos if you're able to untap your whole board. And the upgrades, of course, you could look at cards like Seedborn Muse to constantly untap your board, and then you get to take advantage of that ability all over again. So let me know what you think about the deck. I'll have the link to it in the description below. But if you enjoy the content, subscribe, like, hit the notification bell, leave a comment. Void here signing off. See you all next time.